At Human IT, our mission is to create equitable opportunities for people who are left on the wrong side of the digital divide. And we do that by ensuring everyone has access to four key digital inclusion services. We want to make sure everyone has access to a quality working computing device in their home, access to a high-speed, low-cost internet connection, digital literacy training, and technical support services. If an individual has access to those digital inclusion services, then they have an opportunity to reach their fullest potential, especially in today's digital age. So that's our primary focus. But at the same time, we protect our planet by diverting electronic waste, which is the fastest growing waste stream in the world, by collecting technology and any waste from Fortune 500 companies to small, medium-sized enterprises from all across the country. And we divert that e-waste away from landfills, which is extremely toxic to our planet. And we repurpose the consumer grade tech to then distribute out to people who are left on the wrong side of the digital divide. And we collect millions of pounds a year, which obviously has a huge impact and a positive impact on our planet. So we focus on two things: ensuring that everyone has the tools that they need to succeed in today's digital age, but at the same time protecting our planet from electronic waste. And really, we have become almost like this global company over the last couple of years, thanks to Gather. We're able to work with people on our mission all across North America, from 50 different states in the United States, as well as Mexico. And we've also been able to work with teammates now in continents like Asia and Africa as well. So we're
Yeah.
growing quickly across the world.
Can you give some context in terms of how many people, how many in each location, and then like what kind of teams those are between like marketing versus operations?
So we've come a long way from our startup days where just a couple of us in one location physically together, and now we're about 200 strong. Primarily, we are located in California, Michigan, and New York, where we have physical locations in Detroit, Michigan, and Los Angeles. That's where we collect all electronic waste from across the country. And then we have an office in New York City. That's where our operations ITED work happens in those locations, those physical locations. But all the other departments like marketing, accounting, human resources, legal and compliance, programs, digital navigation. So you can see there's just an array of different departments that are now required to run human IT and to make the impact that we want to see. And those are all done now 100% remote. We have a human IT Mexico team who helps us with bilingual digital navigation work, which is helping people find internet access, digital literacy training, making sure that people have the right support in finding the right device, and then administrative support in Asia as well as Africa. And like I said, just the fact that we have Gather now and it feels like we have one central location that is not necessarily physical, which is a little bit unique. You kind of think about how historically businesses were run. It still feels like we have one location where we can all come together to work on this mission and to grow the company. And that's allowed us to just really open up the talent pool and to find the best talent from really not only across our country, but around the world as well. And I'm excited to see what type of impact that has on our organization as we move forward.
How does Gather actually fit into how you run the company? How does it fit into the other communication tools? How do you use it alongside physical offices, things like that?
We have a new phrase at Human IT over the last year since we've been using Gather, and it starts with our HR team who does all the onboarding and the orientation. And the mantra that we use and the phrase that we use is Gather first.
Mm.
Right? And what that means for us is that let's really make sure that new human ITers are comfortable with Gather and they understand what Gather is for us at Human IT in terms of not only how we communicate, but how we participate in growing the culture and being a part of a team. So it is the cornerstone to our communication and our collaboration at Human IT now. And it's hard to think of a situation or a world to where we're not using Gather to collaborate, even though it's only been 1 year. Something that I'm really happy to say since we've been utilizing Gather is that we've seen a 70% increase in retention just from our staff.
Wow.
Right? People are feeling like they're connected to a community of like-minded individuals who care about the same thing. Right? And before the pandemic, when Human IT was just in one location altogether, we had an amazing culture, right? To where, when you have an amazing culture, a lot of beautiful things happen in terms of growing your company and creating the impact that you want to see in the world. But when the pandemic hit, a big spotlight was put on our work, and a lot of good things came as a result. But our culture started to deteriorate, because we weren't able to, be side by side anymore and feel that community element that I just spoke to a second ago. And people weren't happy and they started to leave, and we weren't able to see the impact that we were seeing before the pandemic. And since we've instituted Gather from the very beginning, and we start with Gather as the main tool to communicate and to collaborate and to create that community, everything has been turned around as a result. When you have a good culture and a strong sense of community within the team, so many beautiful things happen, and people really kind of hit their KPIs as a result much more easily. And I'll like kind of low to jump in there and kind of add to that. What do you think about that?
So this is what I'll say. I cannot really imagine working at Human IT now without Gather, because I remember what it was like working at Human IT without Gather. And like, I had worked remotely in other jobs before. Okay. And I work remotely with people all over the world, and I know what that's like. And there certainly is a level of disjointedness you kind of just have to accept as a result of working remotely in most other settings. The level of ease with which you can actually solve problems when you can just move an avatar, though, is, I think, like, very hard to overstate how easy it is. I was very much a skeptic when this got introduced. I was absolutely not down with it at all. What ultimately sold me, though, was using it for like a week, because then I was like, oh yeah, no, going back to like actually having to create meetings for like random things and also just like wait on Slacks or emails that don't go answered. That was awful, right? Like, I mean, looking back on it, I can definitely recognize that at its best, it was an inferior way of doing remote work when you have whole teams that you have to actually solve problems with. So I would say that for Human IT being at the size to adopt Gather, I feel like was very smart, because I think if we had waited until we were a lot bigger, it would have been like whatever growing pains would have been evident times 10. And I think if it was smaller, I think it would have been a lot easier for like even just a few detractors or a few unenthusiastic people to like really kill the vibe or like really make it not as effective as it was. So I think that our method and moment of adoption was really critical to making it work, to the point where, like I said, I really can't imagine us like going back to something else at this point.
Yeah. He says it was smart, and I feel like there was no choice. The fact that the culture was deteriorating and we were just losing really great talent. When you work in an organization like Human IT, you're doing it for reasons bigger than yourself, right? You're here to make an impact on other people's lives and or the planet, or both. And that sense of community is so powerful for retaining really great talent, people who really care. And we needed to do something to get out of what I was calling our calendar culture, our Slack culture, because it just wasn't working. So was it smart? Sure. Did we have any other choice? Definitely not.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's so painful for Gather.
I want to touch on the nitty gritties of actually making it work in just a bit. But the last thing I wanted to touch on is like, I feel like everything you guys are saying is exactly what we hope people get out of Gather. And I think a lot of skeptics might look at Gather and be like, well, how does it actually concretely achieve that? Like the cultural results that you guys are talking about. I'm curious if you guys can describe very succinctly, like, what is the actual specific features or interactions or things that you hear from employees that lets you know, like, it's actually Gather that's helping us get these results?
Well, why don't you jump in there first?
Yeah, to be very succinct, Philip, the number one feature that makes Gather so worthwhile is the instant meetings and the ability to walk in and out of spaces. That is not replicable on any other video conferencing software or any other remote work platform I know of that is as sophisticated or smooth.
I 100% agree with that. That I think is the primary function in terms of creating that natural collision moment or serendipitous moment, or what people call the water cooler moment within what was the previous physical office, just in a virtual way. And the benefits of that, just like I said, they're really hard to measure, because not only are you able to get just basic information that you need to do your job well right away or share information, but you get to create a strong relationships with your teammates that you can't do in any other platform. Yeah, and then the other thing, and our office is designed this way on purpose, and we're trying to always iterate and optimize what it is that I'm about to the layout of Human IT, what it is I'm about to allude to here, and it's also seeing just visually who is collaborating with who, and are other departments working together on particular problems or projects in order to push our mission forward. And I think for some of us, I think just, and so I'll speak for myself, especially, just even without even being a part of the conversation, but just knowing that people are collaborating that way and I can visually see it on the map, that holds a certain inspiration within that, in my opinion, because you know that you're not the only one who cares about these things, and other people are spending their time, which is the most valuable thing that they have, really on making an impact within human IT and other people's lives.
Mhm. Yeah, gotcha. So it's really about like kind of connectedness with your team, and as a result, the shared mission.
Absolutely. Well, and just it's the connectedness, but it's I think what you need to add to that as well is it's natural it is, right? There's some type of natural when you're in the physical world, right? And you're hanging out with people, there's a natural feeling that's hard to replicate, right? When you're not in the same room with somebody. That I think Gather does a tremendous job, far better than any other platform that we've ever used into creating that natural element
Yeah.
to connecting.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit to all the hard work that went into actually making this work in practice. I'm curious maybe to start off with like what was the origin story for this coming to the organization at all? How did you guys initially roll it out?
Just think like a lot of innovation starts, and you see a lot of tools developed is from a moment of frustration, right? And that's what happened at Human IT in terms of why we decided to lean it together. Is I had a moment of frustration, um, and almost a breaking point. Again, our culture was just eroding post pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Because we had a hard time connecting, and there was a lot of frustration that was happening in terms of the speed of conversation and the speed of improvement and just collaboration. Specifically for me, the straw that broke the camel's back is when I needed just a simple answer on why we were redlining certain contract. And I needed to just get a hold of someone in our legal and compliance department ASAP. And our instant communication at the time was, well, if you need something right away, then use Slack.
Mm.
And I Slacked some of our teammates and just asking some basic questions. And then a lot of things just get lost in context, right? If you're using text alone. And
Yeah.
that was happening in this particular conversation where I had to send 5 or 6 different Slacks. Then there would go 5 or 10 minutes in between that before I could get a response. And something that should have taken a minute or two was taking a half an hour to an hour to get done. You kind of think about all of the moments that are happening like that throughout your organization, and you can see how toxic that can become, especially if you have large ambitions to eliminate or shrink the digital divide, right? You can't move that slowly if you're
Right.
going to be that ambitious. And so something needed to change. And I had actually come across Gather maybe about 6 months before, but I kind of just put it in my back pocket, in the back of my mind. I was like, yeah, I'll look into that eventually. I'll dig in later. Oh, that was a moment to where it came to the forefront of my mind after that moment of frustration. And about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, I was in Gather creating accounts and reviewing all the different maps that you guys had pre-built and picking the right one for us. And I'd slacked invites to maybe about half a dozen people, Low being one of them, saying, hey, tomorrow morning, I want you to start work here. Click on this link, create your avatar, and I'll meet you in our space in the morning. And the rest is history.
Yeah, amazing. And do you remember kind of like what that communication was to the first group, and then how did it grow beyond that as well?
So, Philip, are you asking what was the general reception like? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess I'm asking, yeah, I'm just asking both that and like what is the messaging from leadership to actually make this work, you know?
Yeah. So I'll answer the second one first, and then I'll move into how we received it. The second one was just being asked to give this a try and to go in, make this avatar, pick a desk, and then we'll all just have a working day there and see what's what. And that was pretty simple to understand. But at the same time, it was pretty jarring because, like, at this point, you remember we had only been doing things in what I think is a very traditional and typical remote work setting. So the idea of having this sort of virtually built environment where I was going to have a presence like that was the same as my presence on Slack or what have you, but now there's like an embodiment of it that felt very odd to me. And I think the biggest question that I had in my brain at the moment was why. And I think this was also a big question that other people had was why? Why are we doing this? Because like we already work remotely. Like, what's the point of this? And to go back to something I said earlier in this interview, really the best way that got answered was by doing it. It got very clear very fast why we were doing it because I have a very close colleague of mine named Graham, and Graham and I work very closely with each other. And I thought that we were pretty what's the word? I thought we were kind of like epitomes in a way of the effectiveness of remote work, because like he and I would Slack each other all day and we would just get stuff done constantly through these like really rapid fire communication. And ultimately we were wrong. There actually was a faster way to do it, which is if you are able to just have these like micro video conferences with people. So I would say that the reception at first, at least for me, because I can only speak for me, was a little bit of apprehension and some aversion to it. I definitely had a little bit of a fear as well of like having like a panopticon over me, but that's not how it operates. Like, just as easily as you can get into a space, you can also get out of the space. And there's also the ability to say to people like, I'm busy, please do not come up to my desk. I'm working on stuff. And I think so long as the leadership does a good job of reinforcing what good etiquette is in using the space, just like how there's good office etiquette, it worked pretty well. I'll say this, I don't think I can really remember a time where I've been actually bothered by a person coming up to me and been like, oh, that was a total waste of time. When people come up to my desk, it's because they need stuff done or they need an answer from me, right? Like that's the whole point of the app.
Yeah.
Yes. And I found that very surprising how some of our younger employees were a little bit skeptical, but some of our seasoned employees were all about it from the very jump. And I thought it was obviously going to be opposite for stereotypical reasons, but the response I was receiving from more of our experienced staff was, this reminds me of the old days, like when we were just all in the office together. This is fantastic. I've been waiting for something like this. And to where some of our younger staff who never really worked in an office before, right? They kind of came into the workplace where if things were hybrid or remote, it was a little bit more jarring for them. So I didn't anticipate that, but if you kind of reflect on why that is the case, it could become very obvious. But I just think it was kind of a funny reflection to think on. But I think Lo hit on something that's really important for leaders who are looking to adopt Gather, and it is clarity is key. Like, just like anything else that you're trying to get people to rally around, a sense of clarity and progress and communicating that those two elements is crucial to get something to stick. And that's something that the leadership team and myself really focused on right away with Gather. Like, this is how we communicate that we're on lunch. This is how we communicate that we're available and open to have a discussion. This is how we communicate that we're busy and we're locked in. And like those things were from week one were established. And I think that was really, really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you remember like the operations of how it works? So it was like first you brought in the team of 12 that you invited, and then you brought in, I think, a team of like 50 next, and then at a certain point became the whole company. And like, what was the communication at each point? What was the thought that went into like which group of people comes in next?
It was a bit chaotic. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's not like we had just this amazing, very well-oiled and organized onboarding process to Gather. But I think that was okay because it didn't 100% come from me all the way. Onboarding to Gather from other departments who didn't necessarily get the invite were coming from people who were already in the space. And so it almost became our idea, not just, Gabe's and leadership's idea to come in to Gather. Other people were excited to get their teammates into the space so that way they can enjoy the same benefits that the people who were already in it were enjoying. The invites started going out like rapid fire and people started coming in. And so where we actually had to stop the invites. After maybe, week 2 or 3.
They were like not actually working on this. Then
There weren't enough desks. Like, people were not fully understanding how to, claim a desk and just all like the particulars of Gather. It needs support just like anything else. And so like we put a real support plan together, communications plan together, and then an onboarding strategy from there. Our focus was, let's get the smaller teams onboarded first and just kind of test using smaller groups just to see where the pain points are, gather feedback, gives us time to kind of organize the space and then communicate out in Slack and in person about this thing called Gather and why it's going to be important to us before you see the invite. So that way, when they do receive the invite, they already have all of the what, how, and why in order.
Yeah.
And that also really helped with just the buy-in of the concept. And all the way to the last group, which is our largest department, operations. Because that was a big debate too. Is like, are we going to invite operations who is actually physically together already?
Right.
And like, why would they need to use Gather, so on and so forth. And so that was a debate for a while. And they were our last group to actually come in together because we ultimately decided, yes, we are one community. I don't care which department you work in. I want to eliminate all silos. And I think Gather is an important tool to be able to actually eliminate any silo. If you want to have a conversation with marketing or any work in inventory, you can do that. And there are no more barriers for you to communicate to anyone in corporate in an organization, including myself. You can walk up to anybody as long as your status is green and you're available.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking about your own skeptical, like, initial impressions and how that changed over time. I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, as you guys rolled it out, like, do you guys also hear that from other teammates? I know you guys talk about younger employees that had kind of skepticism. How much did you guys get to see that erode over time versus certain etiquette or communication that you guys did was important for kind of smoothing those over?
One thing I actually wanted to add before we get onto that question, Philip, was that one of the ways that I had a sort of implicit level of skepticism eroded by actually just using the app that I thought was really, I thought it was important of it to mention it to you, was this question also of like, oh, well, I already do a lot of work right now with a lot of my closest teammates and the teams that I collaborate with the most often. And I do it like very effectively, right? I kind of touched on this earlier. But one of the things that I was really surprised at too, especially once operations got in the building, is that platforms like Gather, I think, show you how important it is to open your perspective about what teams need to collaborate with you on what. And also, it really illuminates how bottlenecks exist outside of your purview very often. Because there were just tasks that would be able to get done much faster as a result of me being able to literally go and talk to people in inventory and ask them a question. Whereas previously, I could have gotten a question answered by like submitting an operations ticket or by slacking them. And they probably would have gotten it to me in the same day or two, right? They're a very efficient team. But that difference of a day or two as opposed to a minute or two, I mean, it's just it's like not even, it's not even like quantifiable really in terms of like how much better it makes the work feel because it makes the work just feel like less of a slog and it makes it feel like that the information silos that do exist are really needless. Like there's no reason to stand up these legacy systems, these legacy modes of operating just because that's how they've been done.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure I said that to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, and then I'm curious to the skepticism point too, just as like rolling out to so many different kinds of people, like what more did you guys see from your teammates? What more did you have to do in terms of you touched on etiquette, you touched on communication. I'm curious, like what were some things in those that were important?
I think there's an appropriate and healthy perspective and question on, is this going to be am I going to be disrupted too often? Right? Is this going to get in the way of me doing excellent work? And, only time and experience and just being within Gather can eliminate that concern. And I think Lo did a good job explaining that just over time and just through using the application. Yeah, that wasn't the case. And I think Patrick, who leads our operations, said that, just the 2 years that he had been with us before Gather, he had met more people just in the first 3 months of using Gather than he did the whole 2 years that he was with us.
Hmm.
And that fact of people just running into other teammates that they never had any interaction with in the past, I think was huge to get over any type of skepticism that may have existed, because you're like, that's undeniably better than like that you can actually do something like that. And it started to heal and replenish that element of community again. Like that's what makes human IT strong, in my opinion, is our feeling, our authentic and genuine feeling that we're in this together. And we had lost that for 2 or 3 years there post pandemic. That was now fully recouped just in 1 year of using Gather.
Wow.
And that fact alone just is the skepticism killer.
Yeah, the positive experiences kind of outweigh a lot of the skepticism and just like using it in practice.
I'm 100%. I don't think we have, well, being the CEO, I understand that people say things to you in particular. That's why I wanted to bring Lo on here, just because he's never afraid to shoot straight and he's a part of the team. And I don't think there's one necessarily naysayer within human IT saying like, yeah, why are we on this on Gather and this is actually not been beneficial to us.
Yeah, I work across a lot of teams, y'all. I don't think that I've met anybody who I could say is like really perturbed that we're like on Gather. I mean, for the most part, I would say that the general tone of it now is like, oh yeah, this is us just going to work. This is just like the best way we're going to get the work done.
And we're proud. I think what's really cool that just over the last maybe 6 months, the second half of the first year of using Gather, is like, not only are we bought in, but there's this new sense of pride that exists within Human IT and Gather. And I know that's the case because we've created specific documentation on how to invite guests into Gather and make that a great experience for them. And it's now like a business, it's more of like an angle to get people interested. And as I think it really does a good job showcasing how we think differently and how we're not afraid to try new things, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, I don't know if this question will actually go anywhere, but I'm very curious. I'm curious if you guys think if there is something unique about Human IT's culture which makes Gather so strong, versus say like other organizations. Is there anything in the DNA that makes it so that you guys love interacting with each other so much? Is it? I'm very curious if there's anything that you can think of, because I've used plenty other remote companies out there where people's reaction is like, I don't feel like I need to talk to my teammates more, or like things along those lines. Where it seems like everyone here is on that same page that they want more of it.
For me, it's very simple. There's so many guiding values that utilizing Gather hits for us. And I'm very proud as an organization that we truly lean into our guiding values and just not some fake way, but a truly authentic way. A few guiding values that stick out for us that really lean into why Gather is so awesome for us is creative collaboration. Like not just regular collaboration, but truly think outside the box and collaborate creatively is required for us to solve a lot of the problems that we face. And Gather makes that really easy. We believe in getting diverse perspectives before we make decisions, because that's where we believe that's where truth lives, is in diverse perspectives. And again, Gather makes that really easy to do. And I would say those two values in particular, Human IT leans into daily, and it lends really well into, Gather creates the platform and the foundation for us to do that really, really well.
Okay, I've thought about my answer. So I think the reason that the culture is the way it is at Human IT is because there is a very notable mix of people who have been here a while and people who are new. And I mean that like truly, I think it's like a bell curve. I think if you plotted out our actual like 10 years at Human IT, like all 170 employees, I think you would notice it actually takes kind of a pretty interesting bell curve. But I think the reason that this actually begets a lot of like chatting with each other and a lot of talking is because there is this understanding that like everybody has as Gabe said, a diverse experience that you really should lean on in order to solve problems best. Because there are certain mistakes that if you're new, you just like can't know you could even make. That people who have been at Human IT and have seen how the sausage is made as it relates to digital equity or protecting the earth and e-waste, they just know like you don't even go that way, right? And so I think that like kind of then transplanting that onto Gather, I think it's a very natural growth out from this want to like do the work the best you can because you're already incensed by the causes that made you want to do this work, right? That then make it so that you want to get the work done quickly and accurately and very well. And in order to do that, you have to be able to talk to people instantly.
I see. And it makes a lot of sense. It's like the problem space is very deep. There's a lot of this kind of like live mentorship that needs to happen as well, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is 100% correct. And I mean, but this goes across departments too. Where I lived in marketing primarily for so long, I mean, there were so many instances I can tell you of where if I had a platform like Gather like 2 years ago or like 3 years ago when I had first started, I probably could have avoided some like pretty stupid mistakes that I just made literally because like the sort of the barrier to collaboration of like having to type messages or having to put meetings on people's calendars just to get perspective was there. And especially for me as a younger employee back then, trying to like do skip leveling, right, to get like really high at perspective. Whereas that's another thing I think is really worth mentioning too, is that Gather really like set to me anyway, it mentally flattens the hierarchy a lot. Like a lot. I feel no different at all being able to go up to Gabe as the CEO versus going up to somebody who's in inventory, because like we are all characters on a screen and our desks are all literally on a flat plane that you can see, So like the mental blocking is nowhere near as prevalent as it used to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you have to value those forms of communication and collaboration and perspectives as an organization, I think, in order for you to fully benefit from all of the features that Gather provides.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. What advice would you guys give for other leaders of remote companies where they're, upset about the culture. They feel like it's not fast paced or as collaborative as they hope, and they're thinking of using Gather. Like, what would be the main pieces of takeaway that you want them to come away with?
I think there's a cliche that is true. You know, how you feel about cliches is I'll leave that to the side. But if you the phrase that says if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's not necessarily just how fast can you get things done, but how can you create a culture that allows people to work excellently together? Because that's how you're truly going to go far within an organization. Now, if you can speed that element up, great. And that's what you should focus on. And for any leader who's trying to do that, I would say focus on how ideas flow through your organization. I always tell human IT at all levels, I said time and place, because I want to hear your ideas, but where do they go? If it's an idea that's something that is not urgent, that we don't need to work on this second, then put it here in what we call our huddle boards, right? And we in Gather, we hit our huddle boards multiple times a week, and that's where we discuss new ideas. If it's an urgent idea, come up to me right away in Gather, right? And you need to let me know right away. That's the time and place, right? And so oftentimes what can slow an organization down, if you're really focused on speeding things up, is not having clear channels for where ideas and continuous improvement can exist. So really do everything you possibly can to slick up those channels, so that way ideas can flow and great work can happen between multiple groups, because that's how great work gets done.
Gotcha. Lo, anything to add before we
Yes, I do. Two things. One, I want to add on something that Gabe said, because I really want to highlight it. The culture has to exist first. Like you should not be deploying Gather to like hypercharge your culture if it already is bad, right? Like that's I think if humanity had a bad culture, or if humanity had like bad fundamentals of problem solving collaboratively, Gather would not have done anything for it, right? Like what it may have done is it may have illuminated the gaps between teams so much that change would have to be forced. But like that change would not necessarily, I don't think then you would be like, oh, it's like Gather made us do all these great changes, right? It's like, no, at that point, it's still up to you just to do them in the background. It's like do a lot of, sort of a recursive problem solving. So yes, like I think the reason humanity works so well with Gather is because humanity needed something like Gather to exist, because like we already desired to be this way. But as for my side of the equation as an employee, I would say that the biggest thing I would want to tell leaders about deploying Gather to people like me, especially people who are going to be skeptics, is like, you should show them right away, like how useful it is to getting stuff done that they're already urgently working on. Because that was really critical for me, was the fact that in that first week, there were already high priority tasks that I was working on that immediately the use of something like Gather became paramount. And I think that the quicker you can connect being in this platform with work that people already care about and already need done, the much less complaining or much less like griping you might find that people do. Because then there's less to gripe about. Then at that point, it's just like people, I think, are kind of choosing to complain,
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Lo, for joining, Gabe, for all the thoughts. Lo, I loved your perspective, actually. Like, I thought it was really illuminating to hear from the different perspectives. Yeah. Thank you so much for the time.